Amazing Secrets of Earth revealed. Discover the incredible design behind our transformative home. Sarah sat cross-legged in the attic, rain tapping against the window like an anxious stranger. The air was musty, thick with nostalgia and untold memories. She rifled through dusty boxes filled with remnants of a life that felt both distant and intimate. It was there, amidst old clothes and tattered toys, that she found them blueprints buried beneath the floorboards. The designs of her grandmother, an architect whose brilliance had been overshadowed by a world reluctant to accept women in her field. Excitement churned within Sarah, but it was quickly shadowed by a tightening knot in her stomach, a clash of aspiration and fear. Each gorgeous line of the sketches seemed to whisper promises of hope, awakened dreams she had shelved after her husband's death. Yet, the thought of pursuing a path that felt so out of reach brought forth an unsettling dread. Could she really channel her grandmother's spirit to recreate something out of the ruins of her dilapidated home? As a high school science teacher, her world had never included architect meetings or grand designs, just lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences. Yet, the compression of despair was a weight she could no longer ignore. The vision of creating a sustainable haven sparked an exhilarating flame within her. But lurking beneath it all was the fear of ridicule from the wealthy developers who had long dismissed her ideas. "You really think they'll care about ugly old houses?" A voice in her head sneered, laced with familiar cynicism. Her dreams were naive, and she felt every creak of the floorboards beneath her as a testament to her vulnerability. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The storm raged outside, wind howling, mirroring the tempest inside her mind as she envisioned bringing her plans to life. She felt compelled to share this with her colleagues, to convince fellow parents that her home could inspire a shift in the community's future. But what if they laughed? What if this effort became a fruitless endeavor? The thought of presenting herself, heart on sleeve, vulnerable and raw, sent icy tendrils of dread curling around her resolve. Yet it was her grandmother's spirit that drove her. What would she say? "Don't yield to fear," she could almost hear, strong and unwavering. The idea of standing before the public forum, laying bare her vision, her legacy filled her with a potent mix of determination and nausea. Just as her community meeting approached, news of allegations against her emerged, a dark cloud gathering above her week-old dreams. The developers began positioning strikes against her efforts, revealing petty claims of financial impropriety that sent Sarah's heart racing with panic. What would become of her plans, the ones that entwined her family's history with a hopeful future? Would she find enough strength to defend them, or would silence shroud her dreams, leaving her grandmother's legacy hanging in the air like an unfinished phrase? As the storm continued to rage beyond the attic walls, Sarah could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. She faced not just a community but the spirit of a woman who had fought against the odds before her. And with that weight came a realization: this battle would either forge her into a force of change or suffocate her aspirations entirely. The stakes had never been higher, and the only choice was to confront the looming shadows of doubt that threatened to snuff out the light of her vision. The storm outside finally calmed to a gentle patter, but the chaos inside Sarah's mind raged on. Sitting on that dusty attic floor, she clutched the blueprints, their yellowed edges feeling like a lifeline. Each square inch represented not just a design, but an entire world waiting to be crafted, just as her grandmother had envisioned. Yet the seeds of doubt were creeping in, threatening to choke her ambitions before they could even sprout. She pictured the upcoming community meeting. Sarah had spent countless hours drafting her presentation, pouring her heart into it, seeking ways to combine her scientific knowledge with her grandmother's architectural genius. But as she looked at the blueprints, the shadows in her mind grew darker. Would her colleagues even care? They were used to slick proposals from polished developers, whose visions gleamed with wealth and opportunity. What could a simple teacher bring to the table? However, shaking off the doubts was easier said than done. Each time she envisioned standing before them her peers, once allies turned potential critics, her heartbeat quickened. She felt small, insignificant in the vast pool of polished professionals. Her self-doubt morphed into a paralyzing fear. What if the allegations against her took root? What if she found herself standing alone, ridiculed for daring to challenge the established order? In an attempt to push through the turmoil, Sarah took a deep breath. If she wanted to channel her grandmother's spirit, she would have to confront her own fears head-on. This is about more than just you, she whispered to herself, the echo of her grandmother's words resonating in her ears. It was about legacy, about reclaiming history that had been buried under criticism and neglect. Fueled by determination, she sat upright, steadying her breath. She flipped through the blueprints with new vigor, tracing the lines with her fingertips, each arch and angle a reminder of the hope her grandmother had once fought for. With each stroke came a renewed purpose. This was her chance to breathe life into those pages, to take the narratives hidden within each design, and show her community that beauty could emerge from decay. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the attic floor, shadows that danced both ominously and gracefully. A plan began to form in her mind, branching and shifting like the trees swaying outside. Sarah could show tangible results prior to the meeting. If she could prototype even a small, sustainable model of her vision, perhaps they would listen. Their hunger for tangible evidence might overshadow their skepticism. She could invite her colleagues to the home, let them experience the atmosphere she intended to nurture. When they saw the blueprint manifest into even a fraction of her dream, perhaps, just perhaps, they might set aside their preconceptions. It was a risk, yet it felt like the right path. With newfound resolve, Sarah began plotting the steps she would take to bring her vision to life. She realized a significant truth: real change wasn't just waiting for permission. It demanded action, courage, and unwavering belief in one's own worth. As she scribbled frantic notes and sketches around the blueprints, the weight of her fears began to lift. But the ice of uncertainty still gripped her heart. Would the developers still retaliate, or worse, would the rumors ferment into something bigger? The thought haunted her, but so did the need to push through. She needed allies, people who would stand beside her in the face of opposition. Courage, she concluded, isn't absence of fear but the resolve to move forward despite it. As she emerged from her conflict-ridden cocoon, ready to share her vision and rally support, a glimmer of doubt flickered again. What if the meeting didn't go as planned? What if the whispers of discontent grew louder, drowning her dream in the noise? The moment of truth was approaching, and with it, her fight for justice, for her grandmother's legacy, would truly begin. The time had come to face all that stood between her and her aspirations. The morning of the community meeting arrived, draped in the warm embrace of sunlight that filtered through Sarah's window. Yet the warmth did little to thaw the chill of anxiety that wrapped around her. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her blouse and practicing her smile, willing her reflection to exude confidence. Still, the doubts whispered in her mind, casting shadows across her most carefully crafted armor. Would they see her vision, or would they only see a teacher trying to step into shoes far too big for her? As she hurried through the morning routine, the weight of her grandmother's legacy pressed heavily on her shoulders, both a blessing and a burden. What would her grandmother have done in this situation? The question propelled Sarah forward. Had her grandmother ever faltered at the door of change? With each step to her car, she replayed her presentation in her mind, a carefully stitched tapestry of science and art, of resilience and faith. Yet another question emerged, one that struck harder than the others. What if they only focused on her past, on the scandals that had snaked around her like a feisty viper, waiting to strike? Arriving at the meeting hall, Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself at the entrance. The hall buzzed with chatter, the familiar faces of her colleagues engulfed in groups, laughter floating just beyond her grasp. She wondered briefly if they were discussing her. What had she heard about the rumors that shadowed her recently? Could they be laughing at her ambition before it had begun? Shaking off the thought, Sarah stepped inside, forcing herself to capture their attention. The clink of her heels echoed against the polished floor, a rhythmic reminder that she was here, present, and on a mission. As she caught a few curious glances, her heart raced. She wasn't just inviting critique. She was exposing her most vulnerable self. To her surprise, Sarah noticed someone signaling at her. It was Eric, an old colleague and one of the few who understood her passion for sustainable architecture. He smiled, a warm gesture that felt both anchoring and illuminating. Amid the clatter of voices, he spoke to her. "I can't wait to see what you've been working on. Don't let anyone dull your sparkle." His words ignited a spark within her. Maybe this meeting wouldn't be a showdown but an opportunity for connection. Perhaps there were more in this room who resonated with her vision than she had dared to hope. With renewed determination, she positioned herself near the front, arranged her notes, and took another deep breath. However, just as she started to speak, the room fell into silence. But it wasn't the silence she'd anticipated. It was filled with judgment, a quiet tension that prickled at her skin. As she addressed the crowd, she caught the wry smirk of one of the developers lurking in the back, arms crossed defiantly. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice wavering as she fought to project confidence despite the simmering skepticism in the air. "Today, I want to share with you a vision born from the very foundations laid by my grandmother." The murmurs that accompanied her introduction clawed at her confidence. But she pressed on, recalling the blueprints and the stories they held. Each design was a deep breath, each slide a declaration of intent. Closing her eyes momentarily, Sarah drew from the memories of her grandmother's fierce spirit, letting it guide her words. As she detailed each feature of her proposed model, a space that honored both the environment and community, she sensed a shift. Slowly, eyes filled with curiosity rather than judgment. Perhaps they felt the passion radiating from her. Perhaps it stirred a recognition in them of the architect her grandmother had aspired to be. Yet, still hovering at the edges of her concentration were those quiet fears, the doubters, the whispers. What if she faltered in the face of adversity? The weight of expectation pressed down heavily, especially as a familiar face emerged from the back row, ready to question her very worth. As she completed her presentation, adrenaline coursed through her veins, mingling with trepidation for what lay ahead. She had taken a step into the unknown, yet the reactions from her colleagues remained a volatile mystery, teetering on the precipice of support or derision. As her final words rang out, she heard the unmistakable sound of impatience. The questions were coming. Now came the moment she had both feared and anticipated. Would she rise to their challenge, or would her courage falter under scrutiny? The moment of truth hovered delicately in the balance, a challenge she could not evade, a battle she might just be ready to fight. The air was thick with anticipation as Sarah stood at the podium, eyes darting around the room, searching for allies among the skeptics. The first voice broke the silence, a sharp tone that cut through her wavering confidence. "Your proposal is admirable, Sarah. But can you explain how this ambitious vision will actually fit into our budget constraints?" It was Roger, the same developer whose presence had loomed ominously in the back. His skepticism now lay bare. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Budget constraints, a real and terrifying obstacle. She flashed a brief smile, masking her uncertainty, while she quickly gathered her thoughts. "That's an excellent point, Roger," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "My design involves sustainable materials and innovative construction techniques. These might have higher upfront costs, but they reduce long-term expenses significantly. By decreasing energy consumption and maximizing resource efficiency, the overall financial impact could be positive." As she spoke, she realized that her initial fear was morphing into an unexpected opportunity. This was not just a defense. It was a chance to educate, to share her knowledge, to engage the very doubts that had threatened to dismantle her confidence. Another hand shot up, this time a voice from the fringes. "But how do you propose to engage the community in this project? It can't just be an architectural endeavor. We need their buy-in." The question lodged itself deep, invoking memories of her own uncertainty about whether the community would accept her vision after the shadow of her past. "I agree wholeheartedly," Sarah said, her heart beginning to race in a rhythm that began feeling exhilarating rather than terrifying. Community engagement is central to this design. I envision participatory workshops where locals can contribute their ideas and adapt the design to better fit their needs. This isn't just my vision. It needs to be shaped by all of us. With every eye that turned toward her, the initial chill of anxiety began to thaw, replaced by a flicker of hope. An idea started to spark in her mind. Maybe she could turn this meeting into a collaborative brainstorming session rather than a mere question-and-answer exchange. Instead of focusing solely on the obstacles, why don't we carve out time for each of you to share your insights? Perhaps together we can find actionable solutions that would satisfy both the budget and the community's needs. What do you think? A moment of silence followed, her breath catching in her throat as she awaited a response. Then, surprisingly, a few murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience, and Sarah felt an ember ignite within her. One by one, she encouraged participation, and gradually the atmosphere transformed. Colleagues who had originally appeared skeptical were now advocating for ideas, integrating their expertise, and collaborating on something that felt far bigger than her initial vision. Each suggestion built upon the last, forging a collective strength she hadn't anticipated. By the time they arrived at what could be a feasible financial structure, Sarah wasn't just standing at a podium. She was steering the ship of collaborative creativity. She felt empowered in a way she hadn't expected. The doubts that had haunted her began to dissipate in the wake of this newfound synergy. Just as they were arriving at a consensus, Roger spoke again, catching her off guard. But how will you face the scrutiny that comes with such ambition? Your past isn't exactly clean. His words chafed like a cold wind. Goosebumps erupted along her arms, and she felt her heart drop into her stomach. How would she respond? In that moment, she realized this was her battleground, a test of resilience she had long been waiting for. I own my past, Roger, she declared, the words flowing with renewed conviction. I've learned from it. It motivates me to create something that heals, something that honors my grandmother's legacy. I am ready to face this challenge head-on. The murmurs resumed, this time filled with curiosity, rather than doubt. She sensed a shift in energy as she reclaimed her narrative. As the meeting edged toward closure, Sarah's heart raced with not just relief, but a budding excitement for what lay ahead. The feedback received and the connections forged marked a significant stride in her professional development. But lurking just beneath her newfound confidence, the question remained. Would the path continue to unfold, or would the shadows of her past rear their heads when she least expected it? The echo of uncertainty hung in the air like the calm before a storm, reminding her that this battle was just beginning. Would she be prepared for the challenges ahead, or would they unravel everything she'd fought to build? The clattering of chairs signaled the end of the meeting, yet Sarah remained rooted to the spot, grappling with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The applause that followed felt surreal, each clap like a rhythmic echo of her heartbeat, steadily intensifying. She had transformed from a vulnerable newcomer into a central figure in a burgeoning dialogue. However, the weight of Roger's words lingered like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow her success. As she gathered her notes, Sarah couldn't shake the wariness that gripped her. Each insight shared around that table had fired her enthusiasm, yet doubt began to creep in. What if the excitement generated today dissipated under the scrutiny of their decision-making process? What if the collaborative energy faded, replaced by skepticism once again? In the kitchen of her small apartment that evening, Sarah poured herself a cup of chamomile tea, the warmth an attempt to soothe the anxiety coiling in her stomach. She couldn't let Roger's skepticism invade her mind. It was a battle she needed to win. The self-doubt she had fought to banish now threatened to return, bringing reminders of her past failures. The familiar sight of her grandmother's photos on the counter offered a momentary respite. Memories of late-night conversations about dreams and resilience flooded back. The woman in those photographs had faced her own struggles, yet she never allowed fear to dictate her choices. Inspired, Sarah closed her eyes and envisioned what her grandmother would say. Face your critics with the resolve to turn every doubt into determination. Prompted by this thought, Sarah sprang into action. She would not only address the project's assumptions, but also share the story behind her vision, a narrative woven from the threads of her life experiences. The next day, she would draft a newsletter to share with her colleagues. It would weave together her journey, her intentions, and the community's importance, all while emphasizing her commitment to exceptional transparency. As she began typing, the words flowed like a river bursting its dam. How the empty spaces of her childhood had influenced her desire to create environments that fostered connection and healing. She included anecdotes about the community workshops she envisioned, emphasizing the idea that every architectural design should echo the voices of those who would inhabit it. But amidst her composition, a more pressing concern went unspoken, a reverberation of self-scrutiny. How could she advocate for community buy-in when she felt the shadows of her past implicating her credibility? Would her colleagues genuinely support her if they peeled back the layers that had shielded her vulnerabilities? Partway through her writing, the dim glow from her desk lamp caught her eye, illuminating the blueprint drafts she had just finished. There it was, a manifestation of hope, the design that encapsulated her vision now layered with purpose. It wasn't just about the structures. It was about healing and connection. The clarion call of realization struck Sarah. She was standing at a precipice, not a void or a chance for failure, but an opportunity that beckoned from the horizon. As the clock crept closer to midnight, resolve filled her. She would confront the tension within her, opposing forces of fear and determination, and affirm her identity as the architect of her life. Before turning in for the night, she hit send on the newsletter, feeling the weight of uncertainty replaced by a tangible sense of commitment. The reaction, she thought, might be uncertain, yet sharing her journey would create a ripple effect she couldn't yet comprehend. But as she fell into bed, the tumult of anticipation and anxiety clawed at her consciousness. Would her colleagues embrace her narrative, or would they wield it against her? The question throbbed in her mind like a distant drum, signaling that her journey was far from over. The coming days would demand more than courage. They required her to confront the remnants of her hidden past. What else might Roger unearth that would challenge her newfound resolve? The sun hung low in the sky the next afternoon as Sarah entered the office. The newsletter, now widely circulated, had ignited a flurry of chatter among her colleagues, an electric buzz that hummed through the air like anticipation before a storm. She felt a mix of excitement and dread, her heart racing with every step toward her desk. Would they rally behind her ideas or dissect her words with the precision of critics? Her gaze shifted to the small water cooler, where a group had gathered, laughter cutting through the tension. Sarah hesitated for a moment, torn between the urge to join them and the instinct to retreat. Instead, she took a deep breath and approached, summoning her confidence like a shield. "Hey, Sarah," one of her colleagues called out. "We were just talking about your newsletter. It's pretty inspiring." The words were like a spark igniting lightweight embers of hope in her chest. "Thanks. I'm glad it resonated with some of you," she replied, trying to play it cool, but internally her heart fluttered with gratitude. As the conversation progressed, she learned that several teammates had already started brainstorming ways to integrate her vision into their projects, a testament to the impact of her words. It felt like a validation, the kind she desperately needed to fend off the shadows of Roger's skepticism. Yet, amid the vibrant discussions, a pang of fear whispered in her mind. Their enthusiasm was contagious, but what if they ultimately felt let down by her? What if she couldn't deliver on the inspiration she had sparked? The following day's meetings were intense, discussions diving into specifics about her proposed workshops and design ideas. As she presented her plans, she could feel the scrutiny of eyes upon her, Roger's expression particularly inscrutable. The continued dialogue stirred old wounds, recalling moments from her past when she had fallen short of expectations. Could she withstand this trial? "I respect your approach, Sarah," Roger finally said during a critical moment in the meeting. "But we need to ensure that the community's voice is authentic and not merely a checkbox on a list." There it was, the tension rising once more, a challenge echoing in her mind. She felt her fists clench. Every word she spoke now held double meaning. Digging deep, she confronted the feeling of inadequacy that had plagued her since childhood. "I completely understand, Roger. Authenticity is paramount. That's why I want to involve community members in the process from the very start. Their stories, the heart of our designs, have to shape this, she asserted, surprising even herself with the conviction lacing her voice. The room fell silent, the weight of her words lingering as if testing the waters of consensus. Could these individuals really see her vision form a bridge across the chasm of their skepticism? The subsequent moments brimmed with anticipation, her colleagues exchanging glances. Slowly, nods began to permeate the air. "I think it could work," came a voice from the back. Engagement from the ground up would bring us closer to the real needs of the community. At that moment, Sarah felt a surge of unexpected empowerment, an awakening of something long dormant. Validation was slowly morphing into ambition. But with this surge came a new realization: this initial success was merely the beginning. As the meeting concluded and the conversations faded into plans for the next steps, Sarah stepped aside, trying to collect her thoughts. A flicker of worry rippled through her. Would Roger truly allow her to proceed unchallenged? In that overwhelming sea of support, had she overlooked the possibility of further scrutiny? With newfound resolve, she decided it was time to confront Roger directly. The stakes were too high to leave his motives vague. Perhaps being vulnerable could fortify her resolve rather than fracture it. As she approached his office, heart pounding in her ears, determination flooded her senses. The time had come to face him, to address her fears and his doubts head-on. She needed clarity. She needed to uncover the truth behind his skepticism. When she knocked, a deep breath steadied her resolve. Would he see her as the architect she was striving to become, or would he remain the stumbling block she feared? The weight of possibility pressed heavily upon her. The door creaked open slightly, and Sarah's heart trembled as she stepped into Roger's office. The room was cluttered, a reflection of his thoughts, perhaps a chaotic mosaic of papers and reminders flung across the desk. To her, it seemed an insignia of his management style, an invitation to discuss, but also a landscape of disarray that suggested instability. "Hey, Sarah," he said, looking up from a document, his expression guarded. "What's on your mind?" His calm demeanor belied the storm brewing inside her. She shifted her weight, grounding herself in her intentions. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a pivotal moment. "I wanted to talk about the feedback from the meeting," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I appreciate your perspective on authenticity, but I want to understand your thoughts more deeply." The flicker of a brow raised indicated she had struck a chord. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "I want to see that the ideas you put forward truly echo the needs of the people we aim to serve. I have to guard against projects that lose sight of that." With each word, Sarah felt the old doubts rise. She remembered the times when Roger's skepticism had felt like a direct attack on her ideas, rather than constructive criticism. Could she really breach this wall he had erected? As if sensing her internal struggle, he continued, "Change is difficult, and the last thing I want is for any initiative you lead to fall flat due to unrealistic expectations." "Then let me take responsibility for those expectations," she interjected, surprising herself again. "I want to engage community members from the very inception of this project. Their insights will guide every step as we design our approach. I believe their stories and needs are vital." As her confidence surged, she wondered if she was finally breaking through his reservations or risking the very foundation of her standing with him. Roger's expression tempered with a hint of curiosity, but also concern. Engaging people is commendable, but it's a tall order. What if their voices clash? What if you can't meet those conflicting needs? Sarah paused, the weight of his question hanging heavily between them. It wasn't just a critique. It was an ultimatum. That's a risk I'm willing to take. I'd rather confront the messiness of diverse opinions than silence them for the sake of simplicity. Would you be willing to guide me in finding solutions if things get complicated? She wasn't just asking for permission. She was inviting him into a partnership. The silence breathed around them, punctuated only by the air conditioning humming in the background. "Your ambition is commendable," he acknowledged cautiously, his tone softening slightly. "I'll admit, I didn't expect such a bold response. So, what's your plan moving forward?" In that moment, a strategy crystallized in her mind. I want to run community workshops that help define what success looks like for us. Together, we can create a blueprint that reflects their needs, while I'll also gather empirical feedback along the way to adapt as necessary. Roger nodded slowly, his gaze piercing yet contemplative. That approach could yield a path forward, but you need to ensure that this isn't just about gathering opinions. Show them how their input shapes the work not as followers but as genuine collaborators. Her heart raced. This was the opening she had been hoping for, a partnership that relied on mutual respect, a blending of their strengths for the project as success. Absolutely. I'll create a transparent process that showcases how their contributions shape our design. As they concluded their conversation, a flicker of hope replaced her earlier doubts. She could feel the momentum shifting beneath her, igniting something fierce within her spirit. The resolve she had unearthed felt like a powerful tool, no longer just a novice with ideas but a capable leader equipped to tackle unknown challenges. Before leaving, Sarah glanced back at Roger. I hope you'll be an active part of this journey with me, Roger. Your expertise could make all the difference. His nod signaled a shift, perhaps a willingness not just to supervise but to guide as a mentor. With her heart still pounding, Sarah exited his office feeling invigorated, but with the heavy realization that challenges awaited her. As she walked down the corridor, excitement mingled with a pulse of anxiety. Would she be able to manage the expectations of those she aimed to engage? Each step forward thrummed with the tension of possibility. Back at her desk, she grabbed her notebook and began sketching out a plan. Knowing confrontation was only part of her journey. The real test loomed ahead: how to transform ambition into collaboration without losing herself in the process. The stage was set, but would the stepping stones she laid out lead her closer to empowerment or deeper into uncertainty? Taking a breath, she prepared for the next phase of this tumultuous odyssey. What awaited her as the workshops unfolded? The answers felt just out of reach, shimmering with promise and danger alike. Sarah sat at her desk, the fluorescent lights buzzing above, casting a stark glow over her hastily sketched notes. Each line felt like a thread in a vast tapestry she was trying to weave. Community workshops, what had once been an abstract idea, was now taking solid form. But as details began to sharpen, so did her anxiety. What if she failed? What if the voices she invited in turned her vision into a cacophony instead of a collaborative symphony? The room around her felt like it was closing in, each stack of papers morphing into an insurmountable wall of expectations. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. This effort wouldn't just be about engaging the community. It was also about her growth. It was a chance to redefine herself, to step beyond the well-trodden pathways of comfort and venture into the uncharted territories of uncertainty. The next day, she prepared for the first workshop with the fervor of someone poised on the edge of battle. A flip chart stood ready by her desk, waiting for the first round of participants, yet her stomach was knotted with anticipation. She mentally recited her opening lines, hoping to exude confidence. Nonetheless, she couldn't shake off the nagging feeling of vulnerability. As the clock struck 10, the first few participants trickled in, and Sarah felt their energy mingle with her tension. She started with a brief introduction, emphasizing the importance of their input, creating a design that truly represented their needs. When she spoke of collaboration, she felt the words resonate through her body. It wasn't just a message, it was a commitment. After the introductions, she divided the room into smaller groups, each tasked with identifying their top priorities and concerns. The din of conversation swelled as the participants exchanged ideas and opinions. Sarah observed interjections, nods, and moments of laughter. Perhaps this wasn't going to collapse into chaos after all. Then, a voice broke through the chatter. But what if our priorities conflict with what seems achievable? A woman in the corner questioned, her brow furrowed. Sarah felt a flush of self-doubt press down on her like a weight. It was a valid concern, one Roger had raised. How could she assure them that their diverse perspectives would find coherent resolution? The room fell silent, eyes turning toward her, seeking answers. Panic surged, but at that moment, something shifted within her. She recognized this wasn't about finding solutions right away. It was about grappling with the questions, embracing the complexity without shrinking. "We will face those conflicts together," she replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "This space is not just for voicing preferences but for finding a shared path that encompasses as many needs as possible. It's okay to have different ideas. What matters is how we explore them." A murmur of understanding rippled through the group. The questions would mark their progress, not hinder it. Engaging with those discomforts and contradictions meant that they were truly collaborating. As the workshop continued, Sarah felt her initial anxiety transform into excitement. Ideas flowed, vibrant and rich, each voice adding layers to the tapestry she envisioned. The participants seemed to cultivate a spirit of ownership, wrapping themselves around their emerging blueprint. Once the session wrapped up, Sarah received immediate feedback. Participants were enthusiastic about returning. Yet, the weight of their expectations pressed heavily on her. Could she maintain this momentum? Driving home that evening, she replayed the day in her mind. Each interaction had illuminated different facets of her leadership, breaking her from the chains of her self-doubt. She realized that while the tasks ahead were complex, she had unearthed a hidden competency: the ability to foster collaboration amid chaos. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, a shadow of uncertainty flickered throughout her triumph. Would the discussions continue to flow as freely in their next encounter? What if the voices she had empowered clashed in unexpected ways? The fleeting sunlight whispered of challenges still to come. Each pulse of her heart echoed a mix of resolve and trepidation. She was on the brink of something transformative, but would she be strong enough to steer the ship through rough waters? The next workshop would test her capability to manage conflict, to cultivate a common purpose. With the promise of discovery looming ahead, Sarah steeled herself for the deeper challenges awaiting her journey. Would she rise to meet the storm on the horizon, or would it consume the vision she had begun to form? Sarah awoke the next morning with a strange mix of anticipation and apprehension swirling in her chest. As the sun streamed through her window, illuminating the small room, she felt both the weight of her progress and the shadows of doubt. The workshop from the previous day echoed in her mind, punctuated by the voices of participants and the challenges they had posed. Could she navigate the complexities they would undoubtedly face again? Over coffee, she made a list of potential conflicts that could arise with differing voices. There was no doubt that friction lurked just beneath the surface. What if disagreements directly challenged her authority as the facilitator? The intensity of those moments could easily shatter her newfound confidence and plunge her into self-doubt once more. She arrived at the venue much earlier this time, wanting to ensure everything was prepared for another round of exploration. As she arranged chairs in a circle, she considered how best to guide this conversation. Should she impose structure, or let the raw energy of the group shape its own direction? With each chair placed, she felt the internal tug-of-war intensify between her instincts as a designer and her growing role as a leader. Participants began to arrive, and she put on her well-practiced smile, attempting to project a calm demeanor. The familiarity in their greetings gave her a small boost, but she could sense the palpable tension in the room. Everyone was aware of their empowered voices, and as they took their seats, a quiet anticipation formed. "Let us recap what we achieved last time," Sarah began, scanning the faces in the circle. Each person's expression revealed a unique facet of curiosity and expectation. "We're here to explore our conflicting ideas, not to erase them, but to blend them into something unified. Our differences can be our greatest strength." But just as enthusiasm began to build, an attendee reintroduced a troubling sentiment. "What if we're not really heard?" A man interjected, his tone skeptical. "Last time, there were a lot of great ideas, sure, but how will that translate into real change? Good intentions don't guarantee results." A weight settled on Sarah's chest. This was exactly the type of challenge she worried would fracture what they had built. Yet, beneath the surface of her discomfort bubbled a flicker of fierce determination. She was presented with a decision: retreat into defensiveness or confront this head-on. "Your concerns are valid, and that's why we need to engage more deeply," she articulated, her voice steady. Change is a journey, not a destination. Each of us plays a role in ensuring our ideas are taken seriously. Let's identify clear actions we can take together, starting today. The next hour unfurled in a tense blend of spirited dialogue and dynamic conflict. Voices rose and fell. Moments of disagreement flared, tested loyalties, and compelled Sarah to step firmly into her role when necessary. Each cleared throat and furrowed brow reminded her that leadership wasn't merely about facilitating. It was about wrestling with discomfort, encouraging resilience, and promoting accountability. In one particularly charged moment, two participants squared off, their differing visions clashing in real time. Sarah felt the pressure mounting. The room pulsed with tension. Would she succumb to the urge to pacify or manipulate the conversation to her favor? Instead, she leaned into the conflict, encouraging both sides to articulate their underlying motivations. What is driving each of your perspectives? Let us not just argue what can't align. Let us find out what values fuel your ideas. As their responses unfolded, Sarah's heart raced not just from the adrenaline, but because she realized she had broken through a barrier. She had unearthed a transformative insight. Confrontation could foster dialogue. Through friction, clarity on shared purpose might emerge. As the session drew to a close, there was palpable relief mixed with newfound respect in the room. They had navigated the tumult and expanded beyond voicing opinions into a collaborative effort to define actionable steps. Yet, amid that success, Sarah felt a gnawing uncertainty. Had she truly addressed the underlying issues, or was this merely a temporary truce dressed up in the guise of cooperation? Driving home that evening, a pattern began to take shape. She was not just growing as a facilitator. She was discovering her capacity to dig deeper, to challenge assumptions, and to inspire vulnerability in others. But that realization amplified her anxiety. Engaging conflict was both exhilarating and daunting. In the depths of her reflection, a thought crystallized. What if the next workshop led to resistance so profound it threatened the very foundation of their collective hopes? With seeds of doubt creeping in, Sarah knew she had to prepare herself for the possibility of true confrontation in the name of clarity, a moment where silence could no longer be an option. The road ahead was murkier than she'd anticipated, but the challenge felt like a call to arms. Would she harness the tumult of emotions waiting to pour forth? Or would the very voices she sought to elevate become an obstacle in the path toward solidarity? As Sarah approached the next community workshop, she felt the weight of her journey pressing upon her, heavier than before. Each step echoed with exhilaration and impending dread. It was not just about design anymore, but about the very essence of collaboration amidst discord. She was prepared to face the storm. The room buzzed with energy when participants began to arrive. Conversations floated around her. Many centered on her previous sessions as the ice had started to thaw. Familiarity was growing. Yet within that newfound comfort lay an underlying tension, masked by hope. How would they confront the inevitable conflicts that remained unaddressed from the last meeting? Opening the workshop, Sarah invited them to return to their earlier discussions of conflicting needs, encouraging participants to share their reflections. The vulnerability required was palpable in the air, but something felt different this time. They were here to forge a unified voice through their diversity. This is our chance to make this project truly representative of our community's needs, she asserted, scanning the room for allies. But first, we must acknowledge the rifts, the disagreements. Only then can we explore paths forward that honor every voice here. Halfway through the workshop, as tensions began to surface, a participant challenged her directly. We've shared our ideas before, but what is the plan if we don't see our concerns met? Will these discussions bear fruit, or are we just going in circles? Here, in that moment, Sarah felt an electric thrill. This was her scaled test, an opportunity to move beyond mere facilitation and embody true leadership. Your frustrations are justified, and I want to validate them. Let us identify what we need to transform these discussions into actionable outcomes. Can we divide into groups, tackle each priority, and create specific commitments before we leave today? The discussion shifted. The group responded to her challenge with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Ideas flowed, but so did skepticism. Yet, Sarah sensed that the resolve she called upon from within was mirrored back to her. This process was not just hers. It belonged to everyone in the room. As each group delved into their discussions, Sarah found herself moving from one circle to the next, amplifying voices, encouraging clarity, and navigating difficulties. With every back and forth, she solidified not only her role as a facilitator but as an architect crafting a vision of collaboration that was no longer hers alone. It transformed into the community's blueprint. That evening, as the workshop came to a close, Sarah reviewed the notes each group had prepared. What had once seemed insurmountable had been reduced to actionable steps and a stronger unity. The voices of conflict had not inhibited their collaboration, they had catalyzed it. As she drove home, a wave of satisfaction washed over her. Sarah realized she had taken the fragmented pieces of concern and forged them into a coherent narrative, a shared purpose. The tremors of self-doubt once alarming her began to dissipate the more she engaged with discomfort, the more she fortified her competence and confidence. Weeks passed. The community workshops continued to generate enthusiasm and tangible results. Each engagement deepened her understanding, broadening her perspective as she embraced every viewpoint while fostering collaboration. Then the fateful day arrived when her prototype, a model reflecting their united vision, was ready for presentation at a community showcase. Sarah stood before the crowd, her heart racing, reflecting on the journey that led to this moment. This was her triumph, a culmination of battling fears, navigating skepticism, and forging connections amidst discord. As she unveiled their project, applause erupted. The community members beamed with pride, seeing their contributions recognized. In that exhilarating moment, Sarah felt the spirit of her grandmother surrounding her, her enduring legacy embodied not only through the architecture, but through the resolve of a community. United by hope and vision, Sarah stood taller than she had ever before. She had proved not only her capabilities but had also become a symbol of leadership redefined, one that thrived in vulnerability and celebrated diverse voices, a legacy of her own. In this journey of conversion from teacher to architect of change, she had conquered self-doubt. What had once seemed impossible was now a reality she had authored with purpose, a feat of sustained transformation. The horizon of possibility gleamed before her as the applause washed over her. The echoes of early doubts, criticisms, and fears became background noise, overshadowed by the euphoric affirmation of hard-won success. With renewed enthusiasm, she vowed to continue championing transparency, engagement, and resilience as she embraced the next chapter of her efforts. This was not merely an end. It marked the beginning of her firm establishment in a realm she had trepidatiously approached. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, it whispered promises of the future, a future built on foundations of her grandmother's vision, intertwined with her tenacity. Now, beloved viewer, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your engagement matters immensely. Comment your reactions and theories about the Ending Your Voice counts. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans understand the importance of uplifting these stories of personal overcoming.